everyone, welcome to my green closet. So today we're gonna do a good old Q&A because it's been a while since I filmed one of these and you guys had a ton of questions about growing out my buzz cut, about how things have changed trying to live sustainably now that I have a baby, about conscious living in general, about what's happening in my capsule wardrobe. Anyways, there's a lot, so we'll jump right into it and I'll try to keep things fairly short and concise and not ramble too much. But we'll start off easy. So Marudot asks, really basic question, but hey, how are you doing? It's been quite a year for you and I'm just wondering how you are holding up. So I'm doing a lot better now. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you probably know that we spent quite a while in the hospital recently because my daughter was very sick, but she is doing a ton better. We're settling back in at home. We took a little break over the holidays and yeah, things are going really well. So it was a good start to 2020. I was happy to kind of leave that last little bit of 2019 behind. So then Leela asks, what's new with the house? So everything upstairs I think is pretty similar to what you guys would have seen in the house tour. However, I've been working on putting together my little sewing space in the basement, and that is really coming along. For years now, I haven't really had a good space to sew, so having a nice workspace is so exciting, and I'm hoping to do a bunch of sewing and drafting projects this year. Then Luna Zul asks, do you miss your long hair? Not really. Sometimes I do if I want to, I don't know, do a nice hairstyle. I miss it, but that's pretty rare. And I had a few more hair questions. Karen asked, I'm contemplating shaving my head for a few different reasons. What advice would you give from the other side? I would definitely say to do it. It was a really cool experience. I'm so glad I did it. What's important to be aware of though is the growing out process is not the easiest. You go through a lot of really weird, awkward stages. I'm definitely at a bit of an awkward stage now where I'm trying to get to like a cute little bob length. This whole area to get from about your cheekbones to your chin is really difficult, and you have to get the back chopped quite a bit to avoid it getting too mullety. Everything comes with pros and cons, but if it's something you want to do, I would definitely encourage you to do it. It was a super fun hairstyle and of course the most easy to maintain. Tracy asks, how has your capsule wardrobe changed since becoming a mother? So I will have a capsule wardrobe video coming out hopefully pretty soon. I actually have some of my capsule wardrobe behind me here because I'm hoping to film it in the next few days. We'll see though, but keep an eye out for that and I will answer that question in that video. And then My Lucky Year says, how do you create a wardrobe filled with long-lasting items without sacrificing personal style? I don't know if a lot of slow fashion pieces are available beyond the basics, classic cuts, neutral colors. So there are some slow fashion pieces and brands and stuff available that don't just do basics. There are, of course, a lot of basics, but you can find some really cool, interesting brands. Definitely look for small designers. Etsy can be a great place to find people, and look for designers locally. Sometimes there's some really cool people you'll find. Some of them might also do custom work, so you can get some really special, unique pieces. And then, of course, secondhand shopping is an amazing way to find unique pieces. You can find some real treasures in thrift stores, or especially vintage stores where it's already all curated. And I got quite a few questions about whether shopping secondhand is better than sustainable brands. I do have a video more about this. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I will link that up. And along with that, Jellyfish29 also wants to know, where do I start with secondhand buys to get the best wear? Definitely look for good quality pieces and make sure that they fit in with your wardrobe and is something that you're gonna use a lot. And for how to tell if something is good quality, I have a video all about that, which I will link up in the cards and down below. And then this was a really interesting question from Tara Pup, who says, what do you think about dead stock fabric? Is it truly more sustainable to use it, or is it just textile fabrics producing more in order to sell the remnants at a lower price eventually? That is a very difficult thing because it can happen. From what I've seen with most dead stock fabric, it is actually excess stock. Typically it's stock where maybe a company placed an order for so much and then changed their order, or quite often it's actually fabric that had some sort of issue with it. So maybe the color wasn't exactly what the brand wanted, so they had to redo it. or maybe there was something, in the pattern or whatever. Or also it can be difficult to estimate how much fabric you need to produce all the clothing. So sometimes there's excess from that. And also there can be excess because brands have to order a minimum amount of fabric and they might not actually need all of that. So then they'll try to sell the excess to make a bit of money back. So there are a lot of different ways you can get dead stock fabric. There is the risk that the textile factory might be overproducing and selling it. I think that's a risk that you just kind of have to weigh, and my hope would be at least that brands who are sourcing dead stock fabric are trying to do that as sustainably as they can and finding stuff that is actually dead stock. But yeah, it is a risk, but I would say in general, it is more sustainable. So then Rochelle says, have you tried making your own clothes, sewing, knitting, etc.? And if so, where did you start? I want to start, but it can be quite overwhelming. I mean, I started way back when I was like 13 or 14 or something. I would actually suggest not starting with clothing, but starting with maybe like a tote bag or something relatively easy, just so you can get the hang of sewing and how it works, how your sewing machine works. The next thing to do would probably be to try altering clothes that you already have, and then maybe get into making your own clothes from scratch. There are a bunch of patterns that are specifically for beginners, and there are tons of great tutorials on YouTube in terms of transforming clothes or making clothes from scratch. So that's a really great resource if you're interested in sewing. So then there was a few different questions about sustainable living in general. Andrea asks, I always seem to have to choose between organic produce like cucumber wrapped in plastic and unpackaged, not organically produced stuff. On balance, what's better? It's really frustrating how much organic stuff is in plastic. I have heard that that is to prevent it from spoiling as fast. But what I do is I stick with organic produce when it comes to the things that use the most pesticides, and I can put up a list or link below to more information about which kind of fruits and veggies use a lot of pesticides and ones that don't really use that much, because then the ones that don't really use that much, I will definitely go for a plastic-free option for those. And yeah, that's kind of how I weigh it. So then next exit says, how do you respond to someone who is patting themselves on the back for being sustainable but only doing minuscule things? For example, they are using reusable grocery bags and growing some of their own vegetables, but shop fast fashion and very often eat a very heavy meat diet. Do we congratulate them on their small steps or try to educate them on ways to improve their sustainable journey? I think both. It is really important to encourage and support people taking whatever actions, even if they are small. But it's also good to, I guess, lead by example and hopefully be a positive role model and maybe share some information about how people can continue to do even more in a supportive and encouraging way. I think it's really important to remember that we all start somewhere. Any kind of step is a positive thing, and quite often, at least what I've noticed from people and talking to people online, is people start doing one thing and then they add on something else and they add on something else and they keep learning more and kind of keep improving. So the fact that somebody is doing something, I think, is great, and I think that's already starting them on the path to do more. And I think it's important to try and positively support and encourage that person on their journey instead of making them feel like they're not doing enough. And sort of along with that, Kay Mustovich says, do you have any tips for helping your family, especially a husband who doubts it'll do any good or matter, for coming over to reusing, reducing, and using eco products? So I read a really interesting article recently. I think it was called The Surprising Reason People Change Their Behavior. And I am thinking of doing a video more about this. But that article, along with some other things I've read on behavior change, basically says there's a few different reasons why people change their behavior. First, it's because everyone around them is kind of doing that. And so it's part of that whole herd mentality, I guess, and going along with what everyone else is doing. It's seeing really positive benefits in your own life. So if it saves you money or it, I don't know, helps you do something you want to do, people are way more likely to make those changes. And finally, this article talked about how people will accept change if basically it's forced upon them, which I don't think is the best way to approach your family members or that kind of thing. But in terms of like using eco products, I think if you just have them in the house and you're using them and that's what's available, then quite often people will come around to it because that's just what's there, and they're not gonna sort of go out of their way, I guess, to buy like a different soap or a different cleaner. With things like that, at least. I I think some more, I guess, positive ways of encouraging that behavior are trying to show why it could be beneficial to that person, and also really talking about why it's important to you and what kinds of things, you really care about. Hoping that, of course, your partner or your family members will realize that this is something that's really important to you and that might help them get on board. And also, I think education is a big part of behavior change, but it's very difficult to do that if they're not really interested or willing to learn. And sometimes too, at some point you have to just accept that maybe they're not gonna come around to any of those changes. I lived with my brother for over a year when we moved back, and he did many things that I really wish that he wouldn't do, like bought a ton of plastic. You might realize maybe I can change this thing, but not that thing. And so you kind of have to also pick your battles, I guess. It's definitely really difficult though if the people around you don't really believe in your lifestyle and what you're trying to do. The most important thing though is that you're doing what you believe in, because at the end of the day, you only have control over your own actions. And then I got quite a few questions about if having a baby has made sustainable living more difficult. It definitely has in some ways. Probably one of the biggest impact changes is doing more laundry and using the dryer. I used to never use the dryer, but we cloth diaper, so I have to use the dryer a lot more frequently. Our hospital visit created a ton of waste, which obviously wasn't something that I anticipated or expected, but that happened. And I mean, we all know that having a baby is not the most sustainable thing, but we are just trying our best to reduce our impact wherever we can. And as she grows, I'm sort of looking forward to finding out different ways that we can try to reduce our impact and make raising a child more sustainable. Something that I will say about having a baby though is it definitely has made me think differently about the future. I've always been pretty scared about the future and climate change and everything that's going to come with that. But now having, a person that's going to actually grow up and experience that, it for sure has made me even more motivated and passionate about changing things and working on things, because this is her future. I just feel a huge sense of like responsibility and just motivation to really try and help change things. And then I also got quite a few questions about gift giving and trying to live minimally and what we did over the holidays. And this holiday season was actually pretty great in terms of gifts. We've been kind of working on our families for a while and explaining that we don't really want stuff. And I was kind of worried that with having a new baby that she was going to get a ton of gifts. And for the people that we knew for sure wanted to buy gifts, we gave them suggestions of things that we could actually use. So we basically only got things that we actually wanted and can use and some consumable stuff. So for me, that is a huge success. And yeah, I think it can take some time, but over the years, kind of constantly politely voicing our opinions about gift giving and not wanting things, it does seem to be working, and we're not at all getting stuff that we don't want. So I'm hoping that that continues. So then Steph wants to know, how is EC going? So EC stands for elimination communication, which is basically pottying your little baby. And it's something that we really wanted to do to cut down on diapers. We definitely had a big hiccup and change in the routine while we were in the hospital, but we're settling back into it and it's going pretty well. From what I've read though, it does kind of ebb and flow. So we've had some periods where it was going really well and then not so well, and you just kind of have to go with it and sort of get back in sync. It can for sure be a challenge sometimes when you're going out or have other caregivers, but overall, at least so far, I am really happy that we're doing it. So then Haley has a very big question, which I've kind of avoided talking about. And she asked it very nicely though. Some people have been very rude about this. She says, I've been asking myself if I can be an environmentalist and still have kids. What are your thoughts? So I think that it's a very personal decision. It's a decision that we did not at all take lightly, and it was something that we thought a lot about. Ultimately, we have one life on this earth, and as much as we can try to reduce our impact and be sustainable, I think it's also important to have a fulfilling life. And I think, you can get fulfillment in so many different ways. That's not at all to say that like children are what makes your life fulfilling. But I think, for some people, children might be very important to you and might be something you really want out of life. It's something super personal. It's definitely something that I wouldn't, tell anyone to do or not to do. By all means though, like, not having children is definitely a really great sustainable choice. I do think in some ways it is very selfish to have children, but I think, yeah, for some people children are important and is something that people really want. While, having a baby does definitely increase your environmental impact, I think you can at least try to do that as sustainably as possible and hopefully, raise your child to be a good citizen of the earth. So then Mary says, you had created a minimalist baby items video when you were pregnant. What items have you since added? So a couple items that stand out of things that I didn't think I would need is we got a little change mat and a little potty because that was when we decided to do elimination communication. So we needed those things. And initially I thought that I would just change her wherever, but she's so squirmy and so wiggly, and we just found that we really needed a dedicated spot, and something that was in the bathroom close to the potty just worked the best. So I got a little change mat that we can actually buckle her onto, and that's worked out well. And what else wasn't in the video? Oh, we got a secondhand little swing thing, and that is something that, again, initially I did not think I needed, but she was not happy just lying somewhere on her own for very long. So if we needed to have her anywhere, it was nice to have her somewhere that she could, look at us. And also having a little swing, just, yeah, that's been an amazing thing to help calm her and have her be settled. I can't really think if there's anything else. I would have to go back and watch that video, but I also did a blog post recently about my kind of newborn baby must-haves. So I will link that for you guys to check out if you want to see that. So that's a bit more of an updated one. So next, Mirjana asks, life in Canada versus life in Germany. Anything you specifically miss from Germany? There are so many things I miss from Germany. For sure is the transit system. Where I live in Canada, our public transit is pretty terrible. You basically have to own a car in the city I live in, which I hate. Also, where I live in Canada, if you want to travel anywhere, it's like a big road trip, whereas in Europe, you could take the train to so many different places. That was amazing. For sure miss the train system. I definitely miss the access to sustainable products. It's more so like the city I live in, I would say there isn't a ton, especially in terms of like sustainable fashion. Where I lived in Germany, there was a bunch of different sustainable fashion stores. And a big thing that I would say is different and that I really miss is the general attitude people have in terms of work-life balance. Living in Europe, there seemed to be a much healthier work-life balance. People really prioritized going out and do things and having, free time and downtime on weekends and evenings and really enjoying that time instead of using it to try and work more. So those are the things that really stand out to me, but there's tons of different things that I miss. And a few people also asked about sustainability in Canada versus living in Europe, if it's harder or easier. So like I said, the public transit thing is definitely way easier. Where I live in Canada, the economy is very much based around the oil and gas industry. The new government that just came in is very pro oil and gas. So if anything, like we're taking steps backwards where I am in terms of making things greener and more sustainable, whereas Germany definitely seemed to at least be taking steps forward. Like I kind of mentioned, access to things in Germany, there's way more organic stuff. There's just way more options, I would say. So it was definitely easier to live more sustainably in Europe. So then Shanae says, would you attribute your ethical values to how you're raised, where you came from, education, or a personal decision to inform yourself and act based on that knowledge? I mean, I think everything kind of is maybe a combination of all kinds of things. My family definitely was, I would say, more of like, from a frugal perspective, doing things like conserving energy, not wasting things. I do vividly remember growing up and my mother would prioritize like quality over quantity. I remember going shopping for clothes and she would look and kind of inspect the quality and be like, we're not buying that, that's poor quality. So some of those things definitely came from how I was raised. But then a lot of things really kicked in for me when I was a teenager and in my 20s. It really started, I would say, with probably learning about the meat industry and factory farming, and then I went vegetarian, and then that kind of started my path, I would say, in terms of, you know, wondering where things came from. In terms of fashion, that was really when I started studying fashion and learning about the fashion industry that really piqued my interest in that. And let me know in the comments if this has happened to you, because it seems like it happens to a lot of people, but you start kind of in one little area and you learn about the sustainable and ethical issues there, and then it really just kind of spreads out into different areas of your life. And you know, you start looking at all the different kinds of products and things. That's for sure what happened to me. And then it was just about seeking out information and trying to learn what I could. So then Mundo Di Molina had a few questions that I believe are already answered. And also, what, if anything, do you have planned for the future of My Green Closet? I have some really exciting stuff hopefully coming out this year, which I don't want to talk about it in case it doesn't happen, but I'm hoping to do some really fun things around clothing, design, and manufacturing. Hopefully some fun capsule wardrobe stuff. Possibly some interviews, we'll see. And also let me know in the comments if there's anything that you would really like to see on the channel this year. I would love to hear, you know, what kinds of things that you're most interested in seeing. And then she also asks, finally, some fun questions. How are you as a cook and a baker? Favorite dishes / treats to make? I really love to cook. I think I'm a pretty decent cook, I would say. I really enjoy playing around with things. I'm not great at following recipes. I definitely deviate from recipes quite often. Sometimes it works out really well, sometimes not so well. Baker, I really enjoy baking. I don't do it as much as I would like. And then favorite dishes or treats to make, I really love making cinnamon buns, even though I don't do it that often. Oh, I also have this, it's like a chai banana bread cake. I'm trying to perfect that recipe, so I'm continuing to work on it. It's almost there, I feel like, so I like making that quite a bit. And Annadelle asks, what advice would you give to someone starting out on YouTube and blogging? Definitely talk about things that you're passionate about. I think, you know, there's so much stuff out in the world. Do things and talk about things because it's something that you really believe in and want to share, and not just, you know, looking at what other people are doing or what might be like quote unquote successful. I mean, maybe that's bad advice. Like, there's so many things out there about how to be successful on YouTube, and I have just kind of ignored all of that, and that's probably why my channel isn't like growing much. But I think at the end of the day, it's just important to make content that you believe in. And final question, Future of My Days says favorite books, both in the realm of sustainability and outside. So what did I read this year? I haven't actually been reading a lot of books in the realm of sustainability, really, because there's just been so much going on with our move and my pregnancy and having a baby that I've wanted to read more like fiction, sort of like escape somewhere else instead of thinking about everything going on in the world. But in terms of sustainability, the most recent book that I really loved was The Hidden Life of Trees. I found that so fascinating. It's just amazing in terms of how, you know, forests work and these ecosystems and how trees communicate. It's really interesting. I love that one. I'm currently reading Living with a Green Heart, which at least so far is really focused on having a sustainable home. So that's been pretty applicable to moving into a new house. And then for fiction, I just recently finished The Testaments, which is the second book to The Handmaid's Tale. And if you're a fan of the show, I highly recommend watching it. It's definitely written for fans. I'm just looking at my Libro FM account. Two other books that I really liked are An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, which is Hank Green's book. I thought that was really fun. And I also really liked The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And I'm currently reading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is kind of a creepy, magical, there's a lot of mysteries that I'm waiting to see what happens with. Okay, so this Q&A probably went way too long. I'm sorry if you've stuck through this whole thing. Thank you for watching this all. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you so much to those of you who asked questions. Next video, we're gonna get back into kind of more regular content. I have some really exciting videos coming up, which I can't wait to share with you guys. As always, thank you guys for watching, and thank you so much to those of you supporting me on Patreon, and I will see you in the next one.